alert! Learning is important, right?
Yes, exactly. What a bunch of nerds.
Nerd alert!
Right.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hi, Elena.
Hello, we are back with your weekly Nerd Alert. Every week, I'll take a deep dive into academic marketing research and translate its complex ideas into simple, understandable language for Rob, and of course, for all of you. Are you ready to nerd out, Rob?
Elena, I am feeling extra nerdy today because I'm so excited that I just got fiber installed into my house for the internet. I mean, if there was ever a reason why I get my nerd badge, it's today because it's better than, I don't even know what it's better. It's better than Christmas. Happy day. So yes, let's nerd out.
Christmas. The life of a remote employee. That is better than Christmas. That's great. Well, I expect extra fast insights from you today, Rob.
Ooh, okay.
All right, let's get into it. As always, we'll link the research we cover in the episode notes. This week, we are talking about how investments in your brand directly and indirectly improve profitability and market value. We are covering a recent study. It was published just last year in 2023, and it's called The Effect of Investment in the Brand Value Chain on Profitability and Market Value of the Firm. Lessons of Success Taken from Amazon by Ragda El-Sayed. And I wasn't surprised to see Amazon as a case study here because they're not only a large advertising platform, they are massive advertisers themselves. So Rob, what do you know about Amazon's advertising strategy?
I feel like they take a pretty broad approach to advertising. And the reason why I say that is I feel like I see them on television running ads. They're advertising Prime or they're advertising Alexa, some of their subservices. So I feel like they're a pretty holistic marketer.
I would say you're spot on with that. I did a little bit of digging into this. We have some tools internally that we can use to see ad spend. They're not all like completely accurate, but they have a pretty balanced mix. They spent, they spent a lot on digital. So in the last 12 months, they spent $3.2 billion on digital advertising, $864 million on TV. So that's a pretty big chunk of their spend. $71 million on radio. There's a lot more that's not measured by this tool. So just their Prime Day advertising alone is massive. They do print advertising. They still spend a huge amount on paid search and display. But here's what's interesting. That investment has actually gone down year over year. So they're investing more in ad-supported video, local and national radio, local TV, and cinema. So if you were wondering what Amazon, who's one of the world's biggest advertisers, is thinking, their growth and investments are in channels that I would say are more closely aligned with marketing effectiveness. So do with that what you will.
That's really interesting, especially the radio part. I wonder what's driving that choice. I mean, I'm a fan of radio, so I'm not knocking it at all. It's curious. I wonder if it's like their voice services that they're promoting or, what's the strategy play there?
I was thinking the same thing, but they've had, I don't want to say her name because she's in this room with me right now, but they've had those voice services for a long time. So
yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Or you could just say maybe they're taking a play out of some of these other brands' books they had an overdependence on digital. Maybe they're trying to shift it to more traditional channels too. Or they're just getting so capped out online. They might be trying to spend more in other ways. But one thing that this study suggests is that this mix of channels they have is very effective in both the short and the long, which we talk about a lot on this show. The study looks at how investments in the brand value chain impact profitability and market value. So what is the brand value chain? This author defines it as key activities like advertising and R&D that help brands strengthen their presence and ultimately deliver financial returns. What's really interesting about this research is how it shows both the direct and indirect effects of these investments on brand resonance, profitability, and market value. And it highlights how these investments then shape kind of a company's long-term financial health, which is something that I think we're always longing to do as marketers. How does brand impact the profitability of your company? The author, she breaks things down into a couple of key areas. So first, she shows that investing in things like advertising and R&D directly impacts a brand's resonance. So that would be how deeply customers connect with and stay loyal to the brand. This in turn affects the company's profitability and market value. The study also points out how these investments help stabilize sales over time. So high brand equity, it not only boosts profitability, but it also reduces stock price volatility. So it's not just about how a brand looks today, it's about how these investments pay off in the long term, especially in the context of financial stability and market performance. The study used Amazon's data from 2010 to 2021, and we see that despite big investments in R&D and advertising, Amazon kept its profitability and stock prices steady. The study also reveals something counterintuitive. While it's easy to think that cutting back on advertising or R&D would save money in the short term, the research suggests the opposite, which I know we've talked about before on this show. Reduce investments in the brand value chain. Okay, sure, you might get some savings right away, but ultimately it's going to undermine your profitability and market share. So if you're trying to grow sustainably, these investments are crucial, even during tough economic times. And Rob, we are sort of in a weird spot right now economically, and whatever the reality is, consumer sentiment is still low. I think a lot of brands are being conservative and we're in a little bit of a wait and see moment, but have you experienced that same thing? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that question because I was having coffee with a good friend of mine. God, it was just a couple weeks ago, and he works in consulting. And that's one of the first areas of business when the market starts to slow down. People stop using consulting firms. And he said they're feeling that across the board in their industry right now. People like Walmart and a lot of the big retailers are telling all of their consultancies that, hey, we're holding off right now. We want to see what's going to happen with the market. So there definitely seems to be a level of pessimism that is percolating in terms of people willing to make big bets right now.
I agree. It feels like it's almost like a bracing, but people have
Totally.
been bracing like all year for something that's going to come.
And yet the market just keeps going up,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think there's just all these levers at play. There's what's going on with the Fed and the decisions that they're making, driving down interest rates right now. But is that creating yet another bubble? What's going on with AI and all of the huge investments that are being made there, yet people still have flashbacks of the .bomb era where you're like, oh my gosh. So I think it's definitely a mix of emotions and crazy optimism balanced out with heavy pessimism.
It'll be interesting to see how things pan out in a few years, because I know they've done studies that show brands that invest more in a recession, 10 years later, they're typically the brands that have succeeded. I wonder, this year, it's a weird year, but there are a lot of brands pulling back. I wonder if we'll see that a couple years from now, that marketers that spent a lot this year are going to see the payoffs. And it's easy to say keep advertising, but in practice, marketing, it's generally one of those first things cut when there's a sign of trouble. But to summarize this study, it's really, I think, another feather in the marketing drives profitability cap. So it helps us defend marketing. It's a financial decision. It's not just a communications decision. And now for our Rob GPT, this study shows that investing in your brand is like planting a tree. While it takes time and resources to grow, the deep roots of brand resonance eventually bear the fruit of profitability and market value, just like Amazon's towering success. There we go. What did you think?
I think it continues to touch on that age-old question of, like you said, do you invest in times like this and play the long game? But that's always hard when you might be looking at laying people off. It's that hierarchy of needs. And so it's, like you said, buckle up.
Yeah, I can already see like one critique of this study coming, which is it's Amazon. So Amazon, they can spend a lot of money on advertising. They're a huge company. However, one thing I want to look into, which I haven't yet, was that the author found that there was a correlation between how volatile your stock price was and your advertising spend for Amazon, at least. I would love to see that overall. Is that true that the companies that have the less volatile stock prices, are they also advertisers? Which I could see maybe the reason for that could be if you're always on with your advertising spend, you always have communications. I know people a lot of times they use advertising to influence investors and help people feel confident about your brand. Like if you're seeing a brand advertising all the time or advertising the Super Bowl, you're going to assume that they're doing pretty well. But then also, if you're going to be one of those top TV advertisers, we know from our own experience working with brands, you need to have a profitable, consistent, committed company to invest in advertising in the long term. So I'm guessing it's a few of those things.
Absolutely.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.